All right, let's dive right in. Today, we are taking a high-speed tour of 10 thinkers who give us some seriously powerful tools for the modern tech world. You know, if you've ever found yourself wrestling with a toxic online community or a biased algorithm or just the sheer overwhelming complexity of our digital lives, then you are absolutely in the right place.
Look, as tech pros, we are experts at debugging systems, right? We hunt down bugs in code like it's second nature. But what about the most complex system of all? The human one. Our teams, our users, our societies, even our own minds. This is where philosophy really shines. And forget the dusty old books for a second. I want you to think of this as a practical method for debugging the human code that runs underneath everything we build.
And we're not talking about ancient Greeks in togas, okay? These are contemporary thinkers. Their major world-changing works were published during the rise of the digital age. They are grappling with the exact same questions that define our hyper-connected world right now, which makes their insights incredibly relevant for us today.
So, let's start with the first huge question. Who are we online? I mean, in a world of avatars, social media profiles, and global networks, the code of identity has never been more complicated. Let's meet the thinkers who can help us crack it. First up, we have Judith Butler. They really tackled a massive question. Is our identity, something like gender, something we are, or is it something we do? Their book from 1990, Gender Trouble, just completely turned this entire conversation on its head. Here's a quick look at Butler explaining that very idea. So Butler's key concept here is performativity. Now, this doesn't mean gender is fake or that it's like a stage play. It's more subtle. It's the idea that we construct it through our repeated actions, day in and day out. For us in IT, this is huge, right? Just think about how a user's actions, every click, every post, every like, don't just express an identity, they actively create the culture of an online platform. Oh, and a great fun fact, Butler once joked, "My whole life I've wanted to take a break from gender."
Okay, so if Butler explains how our actions create identity, Kwame Anthony Appiah shows us how labels define it. He is a total expert on the power of the social tags we use every single day. Race, nationality, even our job titles. Let's hear from him on how those labels actually work.
Appiah basically gives us this incredible three-step framework that almost functions like a social algorithm. It's so cool. So step 1, labels. We use words to classify people. Simple enough. Step 2, identification. We start to internalize those labels. They become part of our story. And then step 3, treatment. Society responds to us based on those very labels. It's this constant feedback loop, and it's the engine that drives social identity. And you know, with a Ghanaian father and an English mother, Appiah has joked that he grew up cosmopolitan by default.
So we have actions and we have labels, but where do we find meaning in all of this? Charles Taylor and Cornel West both dig into this question, exploring how our sense of self is built through our communities and our own personal journeys. First, here's Taylor on life as a journey, and then right after, we'll hear West pose his fundamental question about what it means to be human.
So this gives us two really distinct paths to finding meaning. For Taylor, it's all about recognition. Our identity literally depends on other people seeing and acknowledging our worth. You could call it an outward-in process. For West, it's more inward-out. It's about drawing strength from your community, your heritage, and your own capacity for love. And get this for some fun facts. Taylor actually ran for Canadian Parliament 3 times, while you might just recognize Cornel West from his role in the Matrix films.
Okay, so let's zoom out a bit. We've talked about the individual, now let's look at the system. How do we actually architect a fairer world? Let's meet the thinkers who are drawing up the blueprints for a more just society.
Next, we have a true intellectual powerhouse duo, the philosopher Martha Nussbaum and the Nobel Prize-winning economist Amartya Sen. Together, they asked a really fundamental question. What does every single person actually need to flourish? And their answer is something they call the capabilities approach. First, here's Nussbaum on its roots, followed by Sen on how it's applied.
And the difference here is just profound. You see, a lot of older theories saw society as a kind of deal made between equals for mutual benefit. But Nussbaum and Sen's approach starts from a place of love and care. It argues that society's main job is to make sure everyone, including children, the elderly, people with disabilities, has the real, tangible capability to thrive. For anyone in UX or system design, this is a radical shift. It pushes us beyond designing for the average user and forces us to think about real accessibility and human flourishing in everything we build. And real quick, Nussbaum used to act in Greek tragedies to inform her work, while Sen's was shaped by his experience witnessing a famine as a young boy.
Now for a real clash of the titans.
we've got two thinkers with completely opposing views on how political change actually happens. On one side, you have Jürgen Habermas, who champions rational, logical debate, and on the other, Alain Badiou, who argues for radical transformation. Let's start with Habermas on why a shared language is so important in public debate.
For Habermas, a healthy democracy absolutely depends on what he calls a public sphere. This is basically a space for rational debate, where everyone uses a shared, accessible language. It's essentially a protocol for productive disagreement, which, let's be honest, is something desperately needed in today's online forums. And talk about bold. At just 24 years old, he publicly and famously critiqued the legendary Martin Heidegger while Heidegger was still alive.
Badiou offers a complete, total contrast. He argues that real, fundamental change doesn't come from slow, careful debate. No, it comes from these radical events. Think about the invention of the internet or a major scientific breakthrough. These moments shatter the old rules and create a whole new reality. He calls these moments truth procedures. And what's amazing is that this incredibly technical philosopher is also a successful novelist and playwright.
All right, on to our final module. And for this one, we're going to try to decompile reality itself. How do we uncover the invisible code, the ideology that shapes the very way we perceive the world around us?
And for that job, who better to turn to than the Elvis of cultural theory himself, Slavoj Žižek. He is famous for his high-energy style and for using pop culture, movies, ads, you name it, to expose the hidden rules of our society. Here is a classic clip of Žižek doing what he does best. Žižek's method is basically a kind of cultural hack. He grabs a piece of pop culture and uses it as a lens to reveal the invisible operating system, the ideology that's running our lives in the background. But his most powerful insight is that ideology isn't just some set of external rules being forced on us. No, it's baked into our deepest desires. To quote him directly, ideology is the wrong ways we imagine how to escape.
And finally, in a world that is just drowning in data, Thomas Nagel asks a question that data alone can never answer. He challenges a purely physical, materialist view of reality by forcing us to confront the deep mystery of consciousness itself. Here he is, explaining the core idea from his most famous essay.
What is it like to be a bat? This question so perfectly captures his entire point, and it's a crucial one for anyone who works with data. It highlights the massive gap between objective information and subjective experience. We can track every click, every metric, every user behavior, but we can never, ever fully capture what it feels like to be that user. And that one simple, elegant insight has fueled decades of debate.
So, wow, we have covered a ton of ground. But these aren't just abstract theories to think about, okay? I want you to think of them as real, practical tools that you can add to your professional toolkit right now. It's time to start debugging.
So here it is, your new philosophical toolkit. With Butler, you can decode how online cultures are literally performed into existence. With Appiah, you can audit the power of labels in your systems. With Taylor, you can start designing for human recognition. With Nussbaum and Sen, you can architect for true inclusivity. With Habermas, you have a protocol for better, clearer debate. With Žižek, you can debug corporate ideology. And with Nagel, you will always remember the human experience behind the data.
You know, these tools give you entirely new ways to analyze problems and to really understand the human impact of the work you do every day. They empower you to debug not just the code, but the culture and the thinking behind it. So the only real question left is, which tool are you going to use first? Thanks so much for joining me.